Melachim Bet, Perek Yud Bet. This is the story of King Yoash after he was put to the throne upon Ataliah's death at the age of 7. Melachim Bet, Perek Yud Bet. Ben Sheva Shanim Yoash b'Malcho. He's 7 years old when he is beginning to reign. Va'arba'im Shana Malach b'Yerushalayim, and ultimately he rules for 40 years in Yerushalayim. Vayas Yoash hayashar b'nei Hashem. As always, it's letting us know whether or not Hashem deems him as worthy. Kol yamav, all the days of his life. Hasher horahu Yehoyada hakohen. As long as Yehoyada hakohen, his uncle the Kohen Gadol, was teaching him, he was good. Rak habamot lo saru, only the bamot were not removed. Od ha'am mizabchim umikatrim babamot. They are continuing to sacrifice and bring incense there. Vayomer Yoash el haKohanim, he says to the Kohanim, Kol kesef hagadashim asher yuva beit Hashem, all the monies that needs to be brought to the Beit HaMikdash, vehem yichazku et beda kabayit. They should be used to take care of the maintenance and the upkeep of the Beit HaMikdash. Vayhi b'shnat esrim v'shalosh shel Melech Yoash, when it was the 23rd year of his kingdom, lo chizku haKohanim et beda kabayit. He noticed that the Kohanim had not been taking care of the maintenance as they were supposed to. So he says to his uncle, the Kohen Gadol, and the other Kohanim, why are you not taking care of the repairs for the Beit HaMikdash? And ultimately, as we know when we learned the story, they institute the concept of this massive tzedakah box, and people start to bring in their machatzit hashekel once again, and the money goes towards the Beit HaMikdash. At the end of the story, we are told, Az ya'aleh Chazael melech Aram, Vayilachem al Gat Vayilkada. That Chazael, the king of Aram, came and he captured the city of Gat that belonged to the nation of Plishtim. And after he did that, originally it was the Plishtim, and now it had belonged to Israel. And Yoash recognized that if his brother in the northern kingdom is being invaded, then certainly he too has a problem. Vayasem Chazael panav la'alot al Yerushalayim. And then he had it in mind to turn his face and head to also try and defeat Malchut Yehuda. So what does Yoash do to prevent this war upon him? Vayikach Yoash melech Yehuda et kol hakadoshim asher hikdishu. He takes all the money in the treasury that was sanctified by Yehoshaphat, Yehoram, V'Achaziyahu avotav, by his father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, Malchei Yehuda ve'et kodashav, and even the money that he himself had helped to raise for Beit HaKabayit, ve'et kol hazahav hanimtza be'otzro Beit Hashem, and all the gold that was found in the treasury of the Beit HaMikdash, u'Beit HaMelach, and in his own treasury, vayishlach l'Chazael melech Aram. And he sends the money in tribute to Chazael to buy him off and to buy his peace. Vayal melech Yerushalayim, and the king goes away from Yerushalayim, and the war never takes place. V'yeter Divrei Yoash, and the rest of the information about Yoash, v'chol asher asa, and everything else that he did, halohim ktuvim al Sefer Divrei Hayamim l'malchei Yehuda. They can be found in Divrei Hayamim. Vayakumu avadav vayikshuru kesher, and at the end of his reign, his servants got up and they threw a coup against Yoash. Vayaku ot Yoash, they kill him. Beit milo hayored silo. V'yozachar ben Shimat, v'yozavad ben Shomer avadav. Hiku vayamot, they are his servants that killed him. Vayikberu oto im avotav be'ir David, and they bury him in the cemetery of his fathers. Vayimloch Amatzia b'no tachtav, and Amatzia, the king we will study next, his son rules after him. Well, that is essentially part one of the Yoash story. When we look at Divrei Hayamim, we seem to have a part two, or perhaps the same story with just some pieces filling in the gaps of information. And it begins with the end of the life of Yehoyada. Essentially, the story of Yoash's bringing up to reign is the same, but this is really about the end of his life. Vayiskan Yehoyada, the Kohen Gadol, begins to age. Vayizba Yamim, Vayamot ben 130 shana b'moto, and he dies at the age of 130 years old. Vayikberuhu be'ir David, he is buried in Ir David, im hamelachim, with the kings. Here we have the first person who's not a king buried actually in the sepulcher of the kings in Yerushalayim. And the Navi gives us three reasons why. Ki asa tova, because he did three good things. Bi Yisrael, v'im ha'elokim, ubeito. He did something good for Bnei Yisrael by allowing their kingdom of the Davidic dynasty to continue. He does something good with Hashem because he reenacts the brit that Bnei Yisrael had with him, making sure that they're going to be true only to Hashem, unlike the way Ataliah had it. Ubeito, he actually comes up with the plan of fixing the Beit HaKabayit. Va'acharei mot Yehoyada, and after Yehoyada died, ba'u sarei Yehuda, the officers of Yehuda, perhaps these are new council members that came to power after Yehoyada's death, or perhaps it's the same ones, it's unclear. And how do they behave? Vayishachavu lamelech. They begin to deify Yoash the king. Az shama hamelech alehem, and he listens to them. They start, according to most of the Mefarshim, to deify him because they thought it was simply magical that he managed to live for 7 years in the Kadosh Kadoshim, something that even the Kohen Gadol has to fear on Yom Kippur when he enters, and yet this king Yoash, mere blood and flesh and blood, manages to live there for 70 years, so clearly they think he is a demagogue. And what happens because of it? As we know, one bad thing leads to another. Vayazu et Beit Hashem, they leave Hashem's house. Vayavidu et Hasherim ve'atzabim. They start to serve other gods. Vayihi ketzef al Yehuda v'Yerushalayim ba'ashmatam zot. And God is very, very angry. The word ketzef means angry on Malchut Yehuda because of this behavior. So what does Hashem do before He punishes? Vayishlach behem nevi'im l'hashivam el Hashem. He sends them many nevi'im to make them return to Hashem. Vaya'idu bam, and they warn them. V'lo ha'azinu. But Bnei Israel do not listen. The Ruach Elokim lavsha et Zechariah ben Yehoyada HaKohen. The past Kohen Gadol passed away, as we saw. Yehoyada and his son Zechariah, who is a first cousin to the king, becomes a Navi on that day. Vayamod me'alam, he stands by the people. Vayomer Elohem, and he says to them, Kol mar Elokim, this is what Hashem has said. Lama atem ovrim et mitzvot Hashem. Why are you going against His words? V'lo tatzlichu, you will not be successful. Ki azavtem et Hashem vayazov etchem. You have left God, and He has left you. How did they react to Zechariah? How did they remember the memory of his father Yehoyada and all that he had done to give them a king and to reinvigorate them with the covenant with God? Vayiksheru alav, they throw a coup against him, they rebel. Vayirgemuhu even, and they stone him. B'mitzvat hamelach, in accordance with the king's decree, b'chatzar Beit Hashem. And the irony is that they actually kill him in temple property, unlike the way Yehoyada, if you recall, actually made sure that Atalia was removed from the property of the Beit HaMikdash before she was put to death, so that there should never be spilled blood in the Beit HaMikdash. Here, Zechariah, the son of Yehoyada, is actually killed in the Beit HaMikdash walls. V'lo zachar Yoash HaMelech, this statement is somewhat parenthetical, but very ominous, that Yoash the king did not remember the chesed asher asa Yehoyada aviv imo. The chesed is going to be a big word. Vayaharog et beno, he killed Zechariah ukimoto amar, and upon Zechariah's death he called out, Yeireh Hashem v'yidrosh, Hashem will watch you, and He will investigate this and mete out punishment if necessary. And as we learned, 250 years later, Zechariah's blood is still looking to avenge itself. Vahilit kufat hashana, at the end of that year, Allah alav chel Aram. Aram came again. This is the same Chazael that we learned about in Melachim. Comes and attacks Malchut Yoash. Now it seems to make more sense that it seems to be a reaction to his leaving God, as opposed to just in Melachim, where we saw that Chazael seems to be attacking clearly just because he is arrogant after his victory over Malchut Yisrael. Here, Chazael is attacking because Bnei Israel have left Hashem. Vayavo el Yehuda v'Yerushalayim, vayashchitu et kol sarei am me'am, and they pillage the cities and the officers, v'chol shlalam shelchu l'melech Damascus, and they loot the cities of Yerushalayim and send the monies to Aram. Unlike the version in Melachim, which seems to imply that Chazael was bought off by Yoash himself being proactive and preempting a war by sending money forward. Here it seems as if the money was sent almost as punishment for whatever they had done. V'Hashem natan b'yadam, and Hashem allowed them to be defeated. Ki azvu et Hashem ve'et Yoash asu shatim, and they punished Yoash severely. U'belechta mimenu hitkashu alav avadav, and when Chazael turned away from Yerushalayim, that's when the servants of Yoash threw a coup against him, bidmei b'nei Yehoyada HaKohen, to avenge the blood of all the sons of Yehoyada. From here, it seems like it wasn't just Zechariah that Yoash killed, but several of the sons of Yehoyada that were killed. Vayahargu al mitato, they killed the king on his bed. Vayamot, vayikbiruhu be'ir David, and he was buried in the city of David. V'lo kivruhu bekivrot hamelachim. But unlike Yehoyada, that it said was buried not only in Ir David, but in the sepulchre of the kings, here we have Yoash, literally the only king from Yehuda, as of now, that is not being put to lay to rest in the same sepulchre as the king. And the story ends the same way, that his son Amatzia takes over.